Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming, for those in person and virtual. We're really excited to have our amazing guest panelists here today. And I'll get started with the introductions. But hi, I'm Dolores, and I'm the president of the MANRRS chapter here at U of M.
I think you might have muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, is it good? Okay. No, because it's going to do the audio. Yeah, that's all good.
Oh.
Okay, so sorry about that. Hi, everybody. My name is Dolores, and I'm going to give a quick intro on everybody, and then Jordan is going to be facilitating some questions. So I'll first be beginning with Asia. So Asia Dowtin is an assistant professor in urban forestry at Michigan State University in the Department of Forestry. Her work explores the relationships that exist between urban forest structures and spatial context and water in the nutrient cycle in metropolitan areas. Through this work, she aims to broaden our understanding of the influence that species composition related to physical tree traits and surrounding land use have on urban forest functions and ecosystems, service provision. Her work at MSU includes research, teaching, and extension related to urban and community forestry, with her extension efforts largely focused on creating educational and workforce development programming for K through 12 students and adult learners. So Asia also holds a BS in meteorology from the State University of New York College at, I don't know if it is. I'm gonna butcher it, so I apologize. Onia, how do you say that, Asia? I apologize. I don't want to butcher your.
Very close. Oneonta.
Thank you. And she also holds an MS and PhD in physical geography from the University of Delaware. Next up, we have Eli, and Eli currently works as a plant phenotyping scientist at Unfold in Davis, California. In his role, Eli leads the development and refinement of all plant phenotyping techniques for the use of vertical farming research and development at Unfold. Eli received his MS degree in plant breeding and genetics from Michigan State University and served as the MANRRS graduate student chair during his time at MSU. He also served as the junior MANRRS chair at Purdue University, establishing their first junior MANRRS programming in the state of Indiana. And then last but not least, we have Naim, who is here in person with us. Whoop! You say something so we can see your face from the owl.
Machine, look at me.
Why is it on me?
There we go. Yay. So Naim hails from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and is a Morehouse man and Michigan Wolverine. He holds degrees in the life sciences and serves as a natural resource conservation volunteer in Ecuador with PeaceWorks. Naim now directs the MSU Detroit Partnership for Food Learning and Innovation, where he strives to connect people more deeply to nature, the food system, and one another. So thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to have you all. And with that, we can begin with some of our questions. And Jordan's going to be leading and facilitating our questions.
Hello, everyone. And so anytime you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We have some questions to sort of get the conversation rolling, but feel free to engage in conversation and ask questions as they come up. But we're going to start off with general questions just to get to know all of our panelists here. And so anyone can sort of start off with the topic, but what motivated you to enter this field? We'll start off with that and keep it pretty simple.
I'll jump in, and I'll be very honest. Like my academic career trajectory is like way all over the place. Like I started off with literally my head in the clouds studying meteorology, and ended up looking at water that flows down the bark of trees. And there's not really like a clear logical connection. And the reality of it is, what got me to where I am now is a sincere desire to be able to pay my bills. Like I had finished my master's degree. I walked into a situation where I had zero income and like zero hope of an income. And I was getting a little scared. It was the summertime. You know, I needed money. And I had a mentor who was essentially in need of fulfilling a promise that she had made to someone. And that promise was that she'd provide them with an intern. The person that she promised that to just so happened to be starting like their new job as the state director of the Nature Conservancy in Delaware. And they were trying to shift the direction of the organization. They were trying to focus more on urban conservation. They just had zero idea of where to start. So they hired me on to define what that would look like for the state chapter. And in doing what I was supposed to do for them, I started doing a lot of work for me. Like I started understanding that like the sweet spot for me career-wise was going to be having a position that would really allow me to draw the linkage between all the earth and environmental sciences I was learning in school and all of the stakeholders that I could potentially pass that information on to make like sound decisions about how they were going to manage their urban natural resources, how they were going to do that for the sake of especially managing water for residential stakeholders. And that invigorated me. And so I think it was a series of random events, but random events that ultimately shaped my career trajectory and put me in a position to do work that I love and that I feel like has purpose on a day-to-day basis.
I'll jump in. Just wanted to give Asia a shout out. I see she's rocking gold chains now. So she up here, she out here. For me, it was pretty much like, I did the Peace Corps coming out of undergrad. And when I went into undergrad, I thought I would have a career. Well, I thought I wanted a career in like environmental engineering or building solar panels or wind turbines or something like that. But I was really afraid of math. And somehow with the A in calculus 1 and 2, I still did not feel confident enough to become whatever an engineer needs to do. So I just kind of abandoned that, which is kind of unfortunate. Or maybe not, I don't know. Maybe I was meant to do that. I'm meant to abandon it. In the Peace Corps, I essentially was in a whole nother world, literally and figuratively, and I was witnessing all of these trends. I'll take a step back to say I wanted to be an engineer with the assumption that engineers do work that makes the planet way better, faster than others. And a lot of engineers believe that. And a lot of engineers do that, but there's tons of vocations and professions that can make the world a better place. But when I was in Ecuador, I was witnessing so much environmental destruction that my orientation and inclination to what I wanted as a career became less about creating new innovative ways to make the world a better place and more about restoring and healing damage and destruction that was done. And while in the Peace Corps, I read a book called Nature's Matrix, which was written by the man who became my graduate school advisor. And that book was about how landscapes can be managed to conserve biodiversity. So, and it was also saying that agricultural landscapes specifically can be managed to allow plants, animals, insects, organisms to persist. So rather than see it as like humans are destroying the world, I approach it as like humans can restore and manage the planet and the landscape in a way that prevents extinction and preserves life and promotes life. So that also led to my foray into agriculture. And when I ended up going to grad school here at U of M, I studied how to manage urban farms and gardens to support biodiversity. And that essentially brought me to the job I'm at. So I was motivated by a desire to preserve life, essentially, in a nutshell.
Awesome. So for me, one of my motivations is also similar to Asia. Finding something where I could sustain a lifestyle comfortably, you know. But honestly, I was introduced to agriculture by my parents who had a backyard garden. And at the time, I didn't even know that you could study plants until someone recommended Purdue University to me in high school. And I thought they were talking about the chicken company. And I was like, why would you want to study something like that? But once I found out more about the school and the field of study, it was kind of a done deal. And my key motivation there was seeing how much the field could be innovated. And one of my kind of big career goals is to have a career where I get to work with developing countries and develop new and more efficient ways to grow crops and feed their people. And that's kind of been my like North Star, if you will, for my career path. And so one of the avenues that I wanted to have for doing something like that was plant breeding and genetics, and kind of where in plant breeding and genetics, a lot of it is focusing on leveraging innovation and technology to address the need to feed people. So that's kind of my story there.
Awesome, awesome. So it seems like all of our panelists have sort of different ways that they sort of ended up in the field that they're in, whether it be, you know, starting off in environmental fields and sort of delving into different aspects of it, or just learning about it from those around them. And so here we have students who are involved in environmental fields or fields that can be applicable in environmental fields. And something that some students would like to sort of hear about is even you in industry or in your respective fields or organizations, do you still, or have you dealt with imposter syndrome?
I can go first. Yes, for sure. I think everyone experiences imposter syndrome at some point in their career, if not multiple points throughout their career, you know. Especially for me, this is, I would say this, I'm still very early in my career. And this is probably my biggest position that I've had, where I'm basically the go-to person for an entire portion of the company's operations. And so I think for me, one of the biggest things is recognizing that I have a unique set of skills and experiences that no one else has. And everyone is an expert within their silo. So as far as graduate students, in grad school, you are the expert on your specific projects within your specific field of studies, studying that specific environmental aspects, like Asia studying the water trickling down the tree for that specific piece of her project. You know, she's an expert. So recognizing that everyone comes with a set of skills and a set of experiences that no one else has, and that makes you unique in an individual. And even if you don't have the perfect or ideal qualifications to make you the greatest scientist of all time, it just means you have a chance to grow and develop yourself.
Asia, I can go.
You want to go?
No, I want you to go.
Okay. So just, I'm going to build off of Eli's story real quick, but I'll first answer the question with a yes. Imposter syndrome, it comes and goes. When it comes, it's really, you know, it's a little bit of a challenge. And then in the seasons when it's not there, life feels great. And I'll talk about my experiences in a second, but just to build on Eli's point, like one of my really, really good friends from grad school, I think her first semester in had taken it's not like a climatology course. And she took a quiz on the first day of class. It was like a general assessment to see where everyone was, and did the worst. And, you know, went up to the professor and essentially said, I think I'm going to drop your class because I'm not good. And the professor said, no, you're not good. You're showing your potential to learn. And so by the end of the semester, it's probable that you will have learned more than anyone else in the class. And so that's one of the things that I think about when imposter syndrome comes up for me. Every time I feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. It's like, actually, I might be able to, right? I'm here in this position now after feeling like that time and time and time again, and yet overcoming time and time and time again. And so like when it does raise its head, if you will, I'm constantly reminded of successes in the past, how they were met with their own set of challenges, yet, you know, eventually achieved. And then also by the realization that like, this is a great opportunity to learn more about myself, to learn more about organizations that I might be working with, to learn more about the field. And honestly, to learn more from others with whom I can sort of build with, where they may have a strength in an area where I might not necessarily possess that strength, and vice versa. There may be times when I'm the one with the expertise or the strength. And so just really embracing that in life, there is this balance between times when we're shining and times when we're not, and times when we might not feel like we're moving forward versus those successes. I've found that that has been, for me, one of the best ways to push through when imposter syndrome tries to show up. It's like, this is temporary, and the track record of success is much longer. The strengths are much more powerful, if you will, than the weaknesses. And the joy of overcoming and learning is far more powerful and far more motivating than giving in to the temptation to feel like, oh man, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah. I was thinking about juxtaposing. I went to Morehouse College. Morehouse College is an all male, all Black, predominantly Black school in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I was there, as a person who identifies as a male and as a Black person, zero imposter syndrome. Surprise, surprise. Go to Ecuador, I'm essentially the only American, the only Black person, the only like Spanish second language person in that environment. But I was in a community where I was super welcome, and I didn't feel like an imposter there either. And then grad school here at U of M, one of very few Black people. I suppose grad school to some degree in some departments is male dominated, but definitely made to feel like an imposter. And you hear narratives of affirmative action and things like that. And there's a culture and an environment itself that makes you feel like you don't belong, because people are either explicitly saying it or implying that you don't belong here because people like you, people who look like you, aren't here. And then being able to kind of dissect that and say, how much of this is people pushing against me, making me not feel welcome? How much of this is me not being confident in myself? How much of this is me actually not feeling like I'm worthy of being wherever I am? So then I was thinking like the opposite of imposter syndrome might be like pioneer syndrome. And a pioneer is like this person who feels entitled to go wherever they want to go and enters any environment like, what can I take? What can I explore? What can be mine? So I would say yes, and different, certainly. And I guess the last thing would be Detroit. I live and work in Detroit, and I work for Michigan State University. So within Detroit, I'm very much so like in the dominant culture, race, and patriarchy is everywhere. So as a male, no imposter there. But within MSU, also not necessarily looking like my colleagues, but knowing after all the other things that I've been through that I belong where I am. And a part of that is me recognizing that I belong. A part of it is the community that I'm in telling me that I belong. And I think to some degree, MSU does a pretty good job at supporting a lot of its staff and employees in that way. So it's also just recognizing that imposter syndrome is like this psychological thing. Like, what are the voices in my head telling me about myself? And like Asia mentioned, being able to tease through and discern, like, I can deconstruct this and convince myself that I belong wherever I am.
Okay, so for imposter syndrome, it seems that it's something that you will experience in the future, regardless of your field. Depends on how you sort of deal with it and to recognize the talents and the skills that you hold as an individual and how you can bring things to the table. But with that, sort of talking about, feeling like you belong, how would you say it is to sort of look for a job in the environmental field, whether it be as a person of color or as a woman? How would you say it was for you looking for a job in the field that you wanted to go into? And what were some of the feelings that sort of come up if you maybe struggled with that, or if it was relatively simple? How was that process?
I'll go. I'm gonna check myself because I'm gonna say something that I personally have not yet pursued, but hopefully by the end of 2022, I'll be there. And what I'm gonna say is like, in addition to starting a job and working for somebody and being employed, there's also a tremendous opportunity and ability and capacity for every single person to be like self-employed and start their own business and do something for themselves. By the end of this year, I hope to have my own business. That said, when you graduate from school, the narrative is you get a job and you work for somebody. So to some degree, I feel like now, depending on the sector you want to work in, can be a really tough time or a really awesome time, depending on what environment you want to work in. The food system, the agricultural sector for educated, degree-oriented labor, I think has a lot of openings, anything from controlled environment agriculture, if you're working in like an indoor warehouse or a plant, if you're managing equipment, if you're doing research, there's just a ton of opportunity. And I think there will always be niches and openings in the food system, because every day people are born, people eat, and more people need to be fed. So there's a constant demand and supply of resources for sustaining that. Forestry, like out in the world, park ranger, those are, pretty limited jobs. And I don't know, I guess it would be worth asking potentially the folks on the call or in the room, like what sectors you guys are interested in working in. But I would say for the agricultural sector, if you're willing to work anywhere in the country, you can definitely probably find a job.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Naim on that. And there are so the agriculture industry is something that has always been around and will always be around. So I don't think we'll ever get to a point where there isn't an agricultural job open at some point. It's always growing. I think, well, I can speak specifically for my niche industry of plant sciences. There are plenty of opportunities, but like he was saying, sometimes you have to be willing to venture out. Like I'm in California now, even though I was in Michigan 2 years ago. And prior to that, I was in Indiana. So you have to be willing to be a bit flexible as far as your relocation. And if you are, you can have a lot of fun trying new places. But if you're a homebody, it may be a little more difficult to find your specific niche field within your area.
And I'm gonna try to answer this question from two perspectives. One is the urban forestry lens, if you will, and then the other is the academic lens. And so just in general, urban forestry right now, like we actually just wrapped up our state conference that focuses on that this afternoon. And there were so many people who were asking, do you have students that you can send us? Because we need laborers essentially. And these are not positions that are limited to, field-based labor. There are many positions that are available that would fast track somebody on a career or on a path to a career in management and various other leadership opportunities. And I say that because in the urban space, there's just this heightened awareness of all types of issues related to climate change, all types of issues related to environmental justice, and really a growing demand to make sure that folks who are kind of bridging the gap between those two fields are representative of the communities that have been disenfranchised for generations. And so in the urban forestry space, there's been a lot of work to be done to make sure there's more targeted efforts to increase urban tree cover in lower income neighborhoods, community of color, and really to build up a workforce that represents those communities more so than it ever has in the past. And so we've seen a lot of jobs go up in that field for that reason. Now, the accessibility of jobs is different from the jobs, or I would say obtaining a job in my field is not necessarily determined by how many openings are on the market, but the skill sets that you bring. So I think the challenge arises in making sure that you bring skill sets to the resume and to the interview that really make you shine as a leading candidate. And that can be experiences such as involvement in organizations like MANRRS, skills related to geospatial analysis, programming, community engagement, maybe even thinking about certifications that you may be able to obtain as a student that you can then translate into a competitive advantage on a resume. So I think there's a plethora of jobs open. Getting a good job that is satisfying becomes even easier or less of a challenge the more you're able to buff up your skill set here as a student, and then communicate how what you've done sets you apart from other candidates in the field. So that's urban forestry. Now, academia, great question. And it all depends on when you hit the job market. Now, I'll be honest, when I got halfway through my PhD, I knew like I wanted to be a professor. I didn't know what type of school. I didn't actually know where in the country. I knew how much money I wanted to make. But outside of that, I just wanted to teach. And so when it was time for me to prep, the last stages of my doctoral journey and get on the job market, I cast a wide net. And at that time, there were about like 12 to 15 jobs that were on the market or available. And some were closely related, some were tangentially related, but all were interesting. And so it was very exciting to see myself potentially fit into all these different institutions. And it was a really fun challenge to figure out how I was going to sell myself to each institution and let them know that hey, I might be a good fit for you. And I bring that up because in the midst of that process, I had to start being honest about, will that school be a good fit for me? Is that the type of job that I want? And it forced me to really think a little bit more clearly about the type of professional experience that I wanted out of my next job or the next 30 years of a career. And that was, to me, the most challenging part of it all. Being really honest about where I saw myself based on the strengths I had at the time of applying for those jobs versus where I saw myself 20, 30 years from now and the strengths I wanted then. And that took a little soul searching, but I promise you it was so worth it because it gave me clarity in developing those job materials. It gave me confidence when submitting applications or showing up for interviews. And ultimately it helped me to make a decision that I feel like has been like 2 thumbs up ever since it was made. And so the challenge again, really identifying what my skills were while I was a student, doing what I had to do to like develop those skills. And then once I had the skill set, being honest about what I wanted to do. And once those challenges were overcome, the rest was a numbers game. How many jobs were open and who was going to invite me for an interview. But in the end, everything worked out pretty nicely.
I'm glad to hear that.
Before the next question, could the folks in the room or on the call put in the chat what sector or job titles you're interested in working in?
Should I just say?
Yep.
I mean, I'm aerospace engineering, so I'm kind of outside of the traditional environmental field. But I am looking at propulsion in aerospace engineering if that helps.
I just interviewed today with an ecological consulting firm in California. And I either want to go into the landscape architecture field under that or ecological restoration. I'm super interested in just general environmental sciences or going down the environmental planning route or food systems planning route, those kind of options.
I am less sure. I really like environmental sciences and I'm from Detroit and I would really like to stay there. So whenever I envision a future job, it's like community based and like connecting communities to environmental knowledge, especially in cities like Detroit.
Oh, I met Naim.
What's up, chat people? Oh, sorry, Jordan. Go ahead.
For me, I'm interested in water resources, especially in international developing countries. when it comes to sanitation and potable drinking water. The peeps on the Zoom call, feel free to unmute yourself, talk about it, or drop in the chat what we're hoping to go into.
I just wanted to say, I think I have like a very similar story to you, Naim, with except I actually I'm also really bad at I think I'm really bad at math, and then I stuck with environmental engineering, and I'm about to graduate this semester, so we'll see how it goes. But I think ultimately I have that same idea. It really resonated with me, talking about biodiversity, and I think there's more than one way to go about preserving life. And so that was, I guess, my initial goal and driving force with environmental engineering because of climate change. But I think there's so many other ways, now, especially now after taking so many classes within SEAS, the School for Environment and Sustainability, I feel like I've been open to a lot more options, not just limited to engineering solutions.
Thank you. Is it Zuli or Zulai?
Zuli. Zuli.
Thank you, Zuli.
Anybody else?
I can say that I'm interested in agriculture and conservation. I'm currently working on soils, and I'm interested in sort of tropical and urban systems, and I'm considering academia or management. I know there are pros and cons to both, but I'm definitely in the reflection stage of what skills do I have and what can I offer, like Asia said.
All right, it seems people are coming from different places and have different aspirations, but we're also here talking about environmental fields and sort of seeing different ways that us as students can navigate the industry, navigate education. And so we have previously been talking about imposter syndrome as well as finding a job and how leveraging your skill set and identifying what you bring to the table and what helps you stand out from others is very beneficial. And so the next thing we want to sort of talk about is sort of everyone's current role and where they're currently working and how you come to be in that role and sort of what resources you have found to be the most helpful to get you there. What have you sort of used to get where you are now, and how is that going for you?
I am happy to jump in on this one. So I am currently an assistant professor, so working towards tenure at Michigan State University in the Department of Forestry. And you all may know MSU is the land grant institution in the state of Michigan. And so it is our charge to make sure that as a land grant research one institution, we're doing research that ultimately has an impact on the ways in which people engage with the land here and really they help promote quality of life for Michigan residents. And so that being said, there are a lot of professors in the MSU community that have job responsibilities that require them both to conduct research and engage in the type of work that allows for the bridge to be kind of built and utilized that links research on campus with communities that can use that research to build capacity, advance quality of life, and things like that. And so I have the fortune of being one of those faculty members. And so you may have heard folks talk about this. If you become a faculty member, you've got what they call an appointment, and your appointment essentially breaks down the types of things that you're responsible for doing with your job on a day-to-day basis and then over the course of a year. So my appointment is split 3 ways between research, extension, and teaching. And that extension piece is really looking at building the bridge between academia and the community. And so with the 3-way split, my job looks like me essentially doing research related to urban forests and really looking at like that relationship again between all these traits, these physical traits of urban trees, and how that puts them in a position to retain rain when it falls on them, and then how we can utilize that information to be very strategic about the trees that we want to plant in our cities. So because I have the research appointment, I have an expectation to publish papers related to that field. The reality of it is though, most people in communities across Michigan, like my friends in Detroit or here in East Lansing, like 7:45 tonight, they're not dying to go pick up a journal article, right? They have other things they want to do with their life. And those who are making decisions about trees and cities are in the same position. So my extension part of my job requires me to get out into the community and communicate my research in a way that's more effective. And it also requires me to kind of meet some of the needs that the community has expressed. And so here in Michigan, one of the urban forestry needs that has been expressed is a need to provide like training for people to enter the field and build careers successfully. And so another part of my job is really working with K through 12 institutions across the state and adult learners to create those pathways where they can develop the skills, connect with employers, and think about and actually work on building careers in urban forestry. And I'll be honest, I love that part of my job. And then the other part of what I do is teaching. So I have honestly the great fortune of teaching graduate and undergraduate students the technical and social and applied aspects of urban forestry. And outside of the classroom, I get to work with grad students year round and, teaching them how to build the research skills and the extension skills that allow them to bridge that gap between academia and communities. And so that's my day-to-day and my year-to-year. But I really enjoy it because it keeps me fresh and keeps me in a position where I know how to communicate with folks from all different parts of the broader Michigan community.
Yeah, and then for me, so like I said before, I'm a plant phenotyping scientist at Unfold. So Unfold is a very new startup that is only about 18 months old. So for those that don't know, within the startup space, it is very flexible and collaborative. So everyone is doing beyond their specific job title. So to give an example, sometimes within my job title, I'm doing like data collection and I'm doing things specific to figuring out phenotypes and how our plants and crops grow within growth chambers in one space. And then at other times, I act as a consultant for our digital team on how we develop software and how we want to make our digital interface as friendly as possible. And then other times, I'm talking with leadership on company goals and strategy and forecasting with my team. And so within the startup space, you have to be very flexible and willing to do new things every day because that's what your day will be. And so that's kind of one of my favorite parts about the role anyway. So I feel right at home for that. And then as far as preparing me for this type of role, MANRRS was crucial for this type of position. I was a part of MANRRS all through undergrad and graduate school. And so they were teaching me a lot of those skills on how to network, how to get myself out there. Like Asia was talking about, reflecting on what's important to you and your goals and what skills that you can offer. So last year, I actually worked for Corteva prior to my time at Unfold. And during that time, I think it was really challenging for me to figure out how best to move in my career because I wasn't finding like the quote unquote perfect position. But it came to be that the perfect position hadn't been created yet. And so after about a year or so of gaining the experiences and skills within my previous role, this role came out. And it allowed me to then move on to, I guess, the next step as far as leading within the phenotyping and plant science space.
So for me, I work for Michigan State University in Detroit, developing an urban agriculture research center in the city. My primary job roles are conducting or supporting research relevant to urban agriculture. I'm responsible for the development of the site, both the inside and exterior spaces. And that involves navigating city government for permitting and ordinances, finding contractors to do indoor outdoor projects, and then supervising the implementation of those projects, grant writing. Within Michigan State, I facilitate a farm business management program for what we call farmers of the global majority, which are essentially minorities within the US, underrepresented people within the US who are part of groups and populations that are actually the majority of people on the planet Earth. So we kind of push back against the minority term. And yeah, just doing educational programs in addition to all of that. So like tonight, speaking on a panel, I might be invited to talk about urban soil remediation, urban agriculture, food systems, biodiversity conservation, stormwater management. I helped the organization come up with a 2-year plan. Like, it's just a huge variety of things I get to do within my job. And similar to what Eli said about, first of all, I want to give a shout out to you guys' MANRRS chapter, your e-board, or you guys as folks like hustle for you guys to have tons of opportunities to like get exposure to lots of things. And then they work super hard to just be engaging to the people who are involved. So that's a really awesome resource, as Eli mentioned, here on campus to have. And the network, I would say every single step of my adult life has been more successful because I knew someone who was willing to send an email, write a letter of recommendation, connect me to somebody who knew something that would be supportive to me. And a part of that is just an attitude and confidence in yourself to be willing to kind of make extra steps and go that extra mile. But sometimes when you're just down and out and you're like, help me. When you scream, help me, how many people hear you? Like, that's your network. So when you're at events, and I know it's sometimes with the pandemic, it's difficult because there's not that much in-person stuff, but get people's phone number, get people's emails, get people's contacts, Google stuff, reach out. Websites have like that contact us section, like just write an email, like, hey, I'm really interested in this thing. Any feedback would be great. Like, let me know, and build relationships, because someone who knows and cares about you will do whatever it takes to help you get what you need. Send money, send a letter of rec, just listen to you if you're going through hard times. So do not underestimate the value of human relationships. You might be underqualified for a position or an opportunity, and somebody knows the person interviewing you and be like, yeah, they might have did poorly in that interview, hook them up. Like, I believe in this person. So like, there's all kinds of things. One of the things they say at Morehouse, which is kind of distorted, is like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So you might, I mean, you know, we got presidents like George Bush and Donald Trump who don't, I'm sorry, I'm being political. There are people in positions of power who don't necessarily deserve to be in those positions, but they get there because there's other people who hook them up, essentially. So life's not fair. And if you're going to be an imposter, you might as well have a team of imposters with you, pushing you forward. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of what Naim was saying, mentors are extremely important as well. So just to give an example, last year when I was had just defended my thesis, I was in California, fresh and new, excited, go into the job market. I told myself, oh, this will be so easy. All I got to do is apply. The first job I apply to, I'm about to get it. They're going to give me an offer. It's going to be crazy. We're all going to celebrate. got my first offer. It was way below what I thought it would be. Then I tried to negotiate. Immediately they rejected me. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And that imposter syndrome started to kick in. But after a little while, I actually had the opportunity to present some of my research that I did for my thesis at a conference, at one of the plant phenotyping conferences virtually. And through that conference, I had met someone from Corteva, just kind of a one-off type of meeting that I had prior to that at another conference. And he recognized me again. And he said, "Oh, Eli, I see that you presented here. What are you getting into? Like, what's going on?" Trying to kind of told him like, "Oh, I'm in California now. I'm looking for a job," all those types of things. So he immediately connected me to another person at Corteva. And I think maybe like a week or two later, I get a phone call saying, "Hey, is this Eli? I have a job for you if you want it." I got a call from his mentor, who the person that I met with, and he was like, "Hey, he said you're a good person to work with, and he saw that you do some research on plant phenotyping. Let's connect. Let's get you hired onto here." And within a week or two after that, I immediately started working with Corteva, and that was all through human connection and interaction. And so networking and keeping up with your mentors, and even like little things as like LinkedIn, like that's something that is like has been super helpful for me, just like sending email random messages to someone you might be interested in at a company and saying, "Hey, do you have time to meet for a quick like 20-minute meeting?" Most people will say yes if you give them that small time frame to talk, but you never know what those relationships, what can come from those relationships. So.
Okay, so it's like having those mentorships and connections with people, whether it be through an org or just like knowing someone who knows someone, you'll end up where you all are, and sort of having those connections get you to places, and those places get you to, your future career and goals. We heard a little bit about all the things that you all are doing within your role and how you have sort of, Eli, you mentioned the flexibility with it being a startup, and Asia and Naim sort of talked about having their hands in all these different pockets within their specific role. So what would you all say your favorite part or the most valuable part about your day-to-day work is? I guess when you wake up in the morning, what are you most excited to do on a day-to-day or on a weekly basis? Or if maybe if there's an exciting part of the year for you?
I can go. So for me, probably one of the most exciting parts that I'm looking forward to / getting to do now is just having the opportunity to contribute to innovative solutions for the vertical farming industry. So the vertical farming industry is relatively new in the agriculture space. And it is seen as like a possible way towards like more sustainable ways in growing food. And so with some of what I do, I get the opportunity to kind of innovate with the technologies and the things and ways that we're doing experiments and even making breeding decisions on how we can make our crops grow more efficiently and use less light energy, use less water, use less resources and things like that, and just adding towards the kind of sustainability movement.
I can honestly say that I like love all caps the extension part of my job. It is, going back to what I said earlier about like being honest about like the kind of work that you want to do. Like, I think it was probably about a year and a half. No, actually it was 3 years before I finished grad school. Like I had a, sit down moment with myself and I was like, I would really love a job that allows me to translate, science to the people in a way that's meaningful. And I didn't know what extension was at that time. And I remember someone saying that and I was like, oh, it has a name. That's what I want to do at some point in my life. And And honestly, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do that in my position at MSU, because I don't know, it just resonates so much with who I am as a person. Again, I love it because it keeps me connected to communities that extend beyond the MSU campus. And it keeps me connected in a way that forces me to think about things beyond the way that I might see if I was just looking or working within my silo. It really forces me to think about the practical implications of all the work that I do. And so I appreciate that challenge. And all the more, like, I really appreciate the gratitude that, you know, I get to encounter when folks get help from me, and then seeing them utilize that to increase the degree to which they're doing work within their own communities. And to be honest with you, the other thing that I really love about the extension work, especially the fact that I mentioned, like, a lot of that work is tied to workforce development programs, like creating them and implementing them. There's something just so cool about working with practitioners, especially in the urban forestry community here in Michigan. People are just, they're people, and we can joke about everything under the sun, but also switch gears and talk about, like, what's the best way to cut that tree down, or what's the best tree to plant. And I really appreciate that the extension part of the job keeps me rooted and grounded in the human part of me that's not just, you know, an academic who does research all the time. And for me, that puts me in that position where I get to feel like the work is not just a job, it's a part of, like, this whole fulfilled life that, you know, I always set out wanting to live. And so it's great because I get the personal fulfillment, but also the professional fulfillment, and ultimately get to be a part of affecting change at a local scale and more broadly, like, across the state of Michigan. And that's really inspirational on those days, especially on those days when imposter syndrome wants to show its face.
I'll echo what Asia was saying. The mission of Extension is to improve the quality of life of Michiganders, or whatever state Extension is serving in, through educational programming. And I was thinking how Michelangelo, for folks who don't know about Michelangelo, he painted the Sistine Chapel, and rumor has it he did it by himself. That's a really impressive thing to do by yourself. He was paid very poorly to do it, and presumably he loved painting, and he went blind, to my understanding, doing it as well. And I was thinking, I would do my job for free. I would potentially ruin my body planting trees the rest of my life. And, you know, I see all of my work as like my Sistine Chapel. And it's like that thing that, well, fortunately and fortunately, I get paid pretty well to do what I do. So to be able to paint the Sistine Chapel, which is develop a 3.5 acre space and spaces in other parts of the city, into a community space, a biodiverse space with lots of trees, fruits, nuts, perennial plants, insects, birds, mammals, and be able to annually appreciate and measure increasing value in that space, increasing community participation in that space, increasing carbon being sequestered in that space, increasing rainwater, increasing engagement of children, increasing engagement of adults, more smiling faces, better mental health in that neighborhood, more attractive flowers, like that. And then to, you know, to essentially be like, I did that. Like, I studied these things in grad school. I worked on these things in Peace Corps to get to a place where I would have some agency over making this space in the world. And like, that's what I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm doing. So it's, you know, when you connect the dots in life of like, why do I do the work that I do? How did I come to do the work that I do? It's like, I've gotten to a place where I'm doing exactly what I chose to do, what I was trained to do, and what I was taught to do. And it's super valuable, super meaningful to just know that in addition to all that, what I'm doing is something that is meaningful, substantial, impactful, powerful, changing lives and making the world a better place. So I couldn't ask for more.
it's good to hear the things that make you sort of smile and make you see all the hard work come to fruition and see like, what are you actually doing with all the stuff you learned since you were a child up till however old you all are now, full adults,
20.
living lives and doing things that we'll be doing one day. But I want to take a moment and pause from the sort of questions that we have formulated for the session and check in with all of our audience members and see if anything has stuck out to you, if you wanted to comment on or have a question about before we sort of just keep going with our scripted questions. If there's anything, or if the panelists, you've heard things from each other that you wanted to comment on or ask about, we can sort of take a couple minutes for that, just because that's what this space is for, to learn from each other. So I'll just see. Anybody have any questions, comments?
I kind of do. Just about extension, do they do work with like colleges and stuff like that?
Yeah, so there's the formal name is Cooperative Extension. And as Asia mentioned, MSU, Michigan State University, is Michigan State's land grant institution. Every state in the United States has at least one land grant institution. There are also Black land grant institutions like Tuskegee Institute. I want to say, I don't know, a lot of some A&Ms, I can't think of others. And there's also First Nation or Indigenous Native American land grants. Essentially, every county within the United States should have an extension agent, which is a person who is designated to do some type of education or training to improve the quality of life in that neighborhood. Historically, that was something related to agriculture, mechanics, or industry. So U of M is in like the more Ivy League part of towns like UPenn, and those were schools that trained lawyers, doctors, white collar folks. Land grants were supposed to train teachers, farmers, more skilled trades people historically. Now it's all mixed up. You got Cornell, which is also a land grant, but Cornell is also considered like Ivy League worthy. So essentially, every state has land grants. Extension is in every county. Every single county in the United States should have at least one extension person who does educational programming there.
So like we could reach out to them and work with them. Cool.
Yeah, every land grant institution for MSU, if you go to MSU careers, you'll see the job postings, and there's hundreds of thousands just within the state. So if you think you could work in Hawaii, Alaska.
Oh, I mean like work with them, like UM managed to like collaborate on stuff with.
Oh, yeah. And they work with me for sure.
Cool.
I have a question for Asia. Like I was wondering what a career in like urban forestry would look like. I know you do more academic type stuff, but I've never really heard of urban forestry before. And so I was wondering like what you do in urban forestry.
I just gave like a 2-hour lecture on this. I promise you I will not do that tonight. But I think there's so many different things that you can do with a career in urban forestry. So I'm going to start off by saying like the sky is the limit. And I'm gonna take a Michigan example. So right down 94 in the wonderful city of Detroit, we have this collaborative group called the Detroit Reforestation Initiative. And the purpose of the group is to increase the amount of trees that really are found on streets, in parks, on residential property, and vegetative buffers across the city. Detroit is huge, right? And as you know, or may know, Detroit changes from one neighborhood to the next, just like every single city across the United States. So we're not talking about other cities, though. We're just talking about Detroit. And in order to address this issue of increasing the number of trees in the city of Detroit, in this huge city, we got to bring a whole lot of people around the table and figure out like, what do we all bring to the table? What are our common visions or goals for the city? And then how can we work together to achieve that? And and it's kind of really cool because around that table, you have people from national nonprofits, or I should say national NGOs, like organizations like American Forest. And I'll talk about them in just a minute. We also have folks from local NGOs like the Greening of Detroit. We have people from the state, actually we do have people from the state's Department of Natural Resources on there. We have folks from institutions like academic institutions like MSU, Wayne State, U of M on the council or committee. We have people from the federal government on that committee. And I say all that to say that all those people from all those different sectors have a vested interest in urban forestry. So for example, folks from that national NGO, American Forest, we have the guy who's leading it. He's sort of like the strategic planner of it all. And in his role, he strategically orchestrates bringing the right people around the table, identifying what the best funding sources are to help, pilot or sustain initiatives. And he works with an organization that is spearheading the work to undo the decades of wrongdoing that's been done in terms of equitable distribution of trees in cities across America. So that's two different things that you can see being done within one organization at the national level. They also do a lot of work with developing pathways to jobs for folks in urban forestry, workforce development. American Forest just had an amazing partnership with one of the world's leading tree care companies. And for those who may be into modern day R&B, they brought on SZA as a collaborator. And the whole goal was to increase the number of people of color who do urban forestry work. And they started that in the city of Detroit. That's also linked to the Reforestation Initiative work. So that's just one set of things from one organization. With the local NGOs like the Greening of Detroit, for more than 30 years now, the Greening has been one of the leading organizations across the city that has orchestrated neighborhood tree plantings, that has worked super diligently to increase tree cover by planting street trees, park trees, trees at schools and other types of commercial property, and have trained up students from youth through adults, into their later stages of life on how to plant trees. So for that organization, they're working with community members. They are also actually planting trees. And then you have representation from the state government. And the Michigan DNR has a person who serves as the state's coordinator for urban and community forestry. And their job, urban forestry related, but they sit behind a desk all day. Basically, they figure out where we get money from the federal level and from energy companies. And then they review grants from communities all across the state and then give that money out so that folks can plant trees in their community or develop management plans for the trees in their community. And so long answer, but that's just a very short list of the things you can do with a career in urban forestry. On the academic side of things, we have two main subfields within urban forestry, just like you would with traditional forestry. And that's really looking at things from, well, I'm lying, there's more than two fields, but I'll give you just a taste test. So there's more of the ecological approach you can take, which is more of what I do, looking at how do trees function in an urban space? And then, how can those functions then impact the lives of humans, animals, macrofauna that may exist in those urban spaces? Then you have the human dimensions of urban forestry. And a lot of people who are looking at human dimensions research are looking at how do people engage with these trees for good, for bad, for better or worse? What are the patterns that drive behaviors, attitudes, engagement? And now there's a growing field that's completely linked to economics. And how can we start making money off of our urban trees? Let's keep it real. Everything that lives and breathes, trees too have to die. And when they do, you can actually create a circular economy off of what we consider urban waste wood. And there's a lot of markets a lot of research being done to look at how do you establish those markets in a way that is going to be profitable for communities, businesses, but also advantageous for the people who live in those communities. And that links back to some of the workforce development work. So that's a broad stroke of all the different things you can do in urban forestry practice and research.
Any other lingering questions? Follow-up questions? Okay. Well, we'll go into sort of more panel specific questions for individuals that we sort of had come up with. We'll start off with Naim. How has the local community reacted to MSU developing in their community? Have you built trust with the community, with DP Fly, and sort of what has been the process of engaging with the surrounding community?
Yeah, I think for the sake of defining community, there's layers of community. So there's the people who live closest to the site. I usually refer to them as like neighbors or local residents. They're the folks who see what I do every day, who walk through the site regularly, but they're not necessarily people who care about the logistics and the programming and all that. They're the people who just have this thing in their front yard or their backyard. There are stakeholders who live in Detroit, who are in the food system, urban ag sector, beginner farm training, etc. Those would be another part of the community. And then there's just the, I guess, everything in between. People who live in Detroit, people who know about the site and are interested in what happens at the site, people who have engaged in our programs in the past. So as it pertains to the local residents, I would say the majority of them, I'll go with 70%, were very supportive of having MSU come in and do something in their neighborhood, with the understanding that we're in Brightmoor/Riverdale, which is a neighborhood, if you look at its negative attributes, it's marked by high land vacancy, high underemployment, low access to public transportation, low access to healthcare, low family median income, low home ownership, blah, 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 lots of dilapidated homes. So when a large institution or any institution says, we're going to do something in your neighborhood that invests potentially millions of dollars, creates jobs, etc., most people are going to be like, cool, like, come do that thing, whatever it is, just do something, invest in like the neighborhood. And then there are other people who are more cynical or skeptical of, or just weary, apprehensive of having a large institution come into their neighborhood and develop, with the understanding of trends like gentrification, increasing land values, potentially engaging in activities that aren't inclusive or relevant to the community. So some people in Detroit say, this is Motor City. We're all about small industry and cars, and you guys are trying to turn us into a farmland. Like, I don't support that. Or MSU is this really expensive university out in Lansing. You've never done anything for us in the past, so why should we expect you to build something in our community for us? So there are a portion of people who are like that, who are skeptical, and unfortunately, there's a power dynamic of no individual in one neighborhood can cancel or influence what a large institution wants to do, especially when that large institution has the city's permission to do what it is they want to do. So one of the things we've done to try to increase inclusion and engagement with the local community is we have an advisory council. The advisory council currently consists of 4 local residents who are actually individuals who live near the site, who have been involved in the entire project's planning since 2016. And those are people who I meet with now on a quarterly basis. And essentially I give them an update on what plans are at the site. They'll communicate issues and concerns that they have. Most recently, it's been like, in 2017, MSU said we were going to do this, $1.5 million thing. So far, we've invested less than $1 million, and it doesn't look like what we promised. So they're like, what's up? Like, y'all said y'all was gonna give us some programs and all these things, and like stuff not happening. So where's the programs for our kids? Another way that we engage folks is I just go door to door twice a year with flyers and newsletters. That's an opportunity for me just to walk the neighborhood, to meet people, to show that, you know, I'm interested and willing to come up on your front doorstep and talk to you, however long you potentially want to speak to me. And that's it's a really important part of my work. And I really value just being able to say, whatever responsibilities need to be done administratively are just as important as me knowing that the people who live closest to the site trust and respect and care about what I'm trying to do here, or support it. That's the best thing. If like people are like, we love to see what you guys are doing. We're happy, keep doing the work. So I think it's really important to try to be as outward and proactive about reaching out to people as it is of doing good work. So I could just potentially try my best to put $2 million into making the site a really attractive place without doing any kind of outreach, and just hope that, the thing that people see every day is valuable. But once again, the relationship that we have with the people who live closest is the most important thing. So right now, the biggest part is me going door to door 2 times a year, once in the summer, once in the winter, and the advisory council. And that's kind of the best we can do right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I remember 2019 was when we started. I worked with Naim in 2019 on starting the site, and I remember we were getting wood chips and bringing it out of a U-Haul, and someone came over and asked if we were dumping illegally. And so I do remember seeing some people in the community sort of, wondering what was going on and walking through the site and sort of asking those questions. And so I'm glad that community engagement is still going. And even with COVID, they're still being able to engage with people in that momentum. But for our next question, we're going to move on to Eli. We wanted to sort of ask you to talk more about your company Unfold. You did mention it was a smaller startup, but we wanted to hear more about the culture there and how they have been supporting you and your research.
Yeah, so like I said before, Unfold is a very new company. We're only 18 months old, so things are happening at a pretty fast pace, but at the same time, we're constantly realigning, pivoting, and things like that to make sure we're heading towards where we want to be in 5 to 10 years or so. And just about the size, we're only about 20 employees right now. I think I was number 17. So I think by the end of the year, we're trying to get closer to 35, 40, something like that. So we are rapidly growing. So that's really cool to see. As far as the culture has been very great. It's still a very small company, so it doesn't have the same, how do I say, the same formalness as a very large company. It's a bit more genuine, in my personal opinion, when comparing it to my experience with other very large ad companies that I work with. So to give you an example, like we have a health and wellness benefit that we can take advantage of, and it's made to be very loose, where we can take like a spa day or buy a gym membership or get hiking equipment and things like that, just to take care of our mental well-being, so that we can be refreshed and ready to go when it's time to work. Actually, yesterday, I got the opportunity to meet with a lot of the company and the leadership in person. And it was really cool to see how genuine people were, and how everyone cared about everyone's like well-being, while still having a very clear vision and direction for where the company wants to go. So that's just kind of like a brief snapshot into the company. And then in terms of support, the company has been extremely supportive because I'm the leader for phenotyping. So they're pretty much like, we needed you to be in this position. So please do everything you can to make it happen. So I'm constantly in meetings, talking with people, trying to figure out how we can standardize processes. How can we build up the foundation for what we're trying to do? We're in the process of right now of trying to build a new state-of-the-art phenotyping facility. So they're asking me a lot of questions on how are we going to collect this data? How are we going to make it standardized? How are we going to make it relatable and relevant to what we want to do in the future? And so with that, just always being very humble, open, and transparent about what my leadership wants from me and what I can actually offer. And so it's been a really great experience thus far. I'm only in my first couple of weeks, months, whatever, but it's been exciting. So yeah.
Could you share what the product or service of Unfold is?
Yeah, so Unfold focuses on the vertical farming space. So we are a seeds company. So our main product is the selling of seeds. And then eventually we want to get into the space of figuring out how we can leverage data and software so that producers and growers who are growing our different products and things like that, we can help them to make better decisions on what to grow and when to grow things. Even looking at things like light recipes. So vertical farming space, when you think about a controlled growth environment, it's very different from an open field environment. So open field, you have any and everything can happen in that environment, from insect pressure to disease to maybe you get a cloudy day, maybe you get a sunny day, maybe you get a 100-degree day to a really cold day, but in the controlled environment space, we get to control almost everything within the environment, from how much CO2 is pumped into the chambers, the light recipe, how much red, green, blue light is being shined on the plants at any given time, even controlling the day length on how long the sun is shining on the plant versus the night cycle, and that can really affect the plant's physiology. So having that data and having that understanding and those capabilities to have that analysis ready for our customers is very helpful for them as producers and how to grow their crops more efficiently.
It's really great to hear that you're in this newer position, but they need you, you're the leader in that, and that's really cool to hear and see, especially since it's a startup and you're navigating this space, and I hope you're enjoying it out there in California, you said, right?
Yep, in California, very different from Michigan. So it is February, and this week has been in the 70s, so it's been very nice. I'm sure y'all have snow and all types of craziness. We do not.
I'm going there next month, so hopefully it's nice. All right. Well, I guess we'll move into one last question for our panelist, Asia, and then we'll go into a general question before we close out, respect of everyone's time. So Asia, if you could speak about your pursuit in a PhD and sort of how that went for you. Were there any problems or challenges that you had, and then sort of the support that you found was most beneficial during that process?
Absolutely. I will just come out the gate with the truth. And the truth is, I almost quit my program about, I want to say it was 6 to 8 months in. After I came off the high of working with the Nature Conservancy and knowing that I wanted to do urban conservation and urban water resource management, I started working with a faculty member who had very similar interests. And we went south very, very quickly. My first year in my PhD program was when Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast. And, I went to school in Delaware, not too far from the coast. And my advisor wanted me to sample during the hurricane. And I was like, oh, this doesn't sound smart or safe. But I was actually berated for saying that I wouldn't do that. And that quickly led to just a very unhealthy relationship with the advisor. And eventually they began to share things with me that made me not feel safe in that space. So essentially they said, I'm not going to nominate you for this scholarship just because you're a first generation student. But I'm not a first generation student, right? We have degrees in my family going generations back, but he assumed that based on my race. And then he actually started telling other graduate students in the department that the only reason I was actually allowed into the PhD program with some funding is because they being like the department chair, they found a pot of Black student funding that they could use to pay for my degree. So I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this with this person. I'm gonna bow out gracefully. And I told that to my parents, and they were like, we will do what we have to support you. So they connected me to other family members that I had no real connection with at that time, but who had completed like advanced schooling, whether it was 1 or 2 master's degrees or a doctoral degree. And that opened my eyes to what I needed. And I realized what I needed was support. I needed safe spaces I could turn to when I was like, contemplating bouncing, or when for whatever challenges may come up for the rest of the degree. And to get that support, I knew that I could look in-house in the department, but I also knew that I wanted to connect with my peers. And so I kind of dug my heels really deep into the Black Graduate Student Association at that time, or BGSA. And BGSA provided like that peer network, but we had a ton of faculty who were like investing in us, making sure we made it to the finish line. And so through that, I got connected to faculty who, although they didn't study what I studied, they knew the game, they knew the system, and they provided that support and that broader sense of community that I needed to get through to the finish line. And so I needed the support, I needed the community, and to an extent, I needed some validation for those times when the imposter syndrome showed back up again. It was not difficult to find, because at that time, like a majority of the Black graduate students on the University of Delaware campus were like hungry and thirsty for that community. And so we had some momentum that was established to create it, that was supported by both student and faculty interest. And so all it took for me was to just, humble myself a little bit and admit that I needed that. And then once I did and connected to the community, like there was no looking back. And I credit completion of the degree to my engagement with the Black Graduate Student Association. And honestly, I think, let's see what challenges or whatever, like the reality of it is there have been challenges that have come up post PhD, some of which have mirrored that. But I knew then what I needed then, and it really mirrors what I need now, and it's community. And so even when the challenges come back up now, whether it's race related or discouragement or whatever, I found that there's beauty in tapping into the community. And I think both Naim and Eli said this earlier, and I know Naim did in terms of working in Detroit with DP5. Like I had to build my network, and it wasn't, and I'm talking post PhD, it wasn't a network of people who could help me like, get to the next level or get me on this board. It was the network of people in the communities that I really wanted to work in. And those people and those networks actually became my people. And they're who I turn to even now when I need those bits of encouragement or support.
Glad to hear that everything worked out after hearing about the initial experience jumping into your PhD and dealing with some, I guess, inappropriate or unprofessional people. So I'm glad to hear that your PhD worked out and you sort of got to that program with the support of others. So we're sort of at the end of our event, our panel. I just wanted to get sort of a quick lightning round of advice you all would like to bestow upon the U of M people from MSU associates. We'll let that slide because we're all Black environmentalists, people of color here. And so we'll accept one last round of some advice from each of our panelists, and then we'll let everyone get about their evening. So whoever would like to start, we'll get through that?
I'll go. Network is just a weird or silly sounding word for community. At Morehouse, Morehouse really inflates the ego. But we would say stuff like, if things don't work out for you, you can come work for me someday, right? You guys are at University of Michigan, one of the greatest institutions in the United States of America. You have peers right now who, if you just be friends with them and they make it and you don't, you might just be able to work for them. You might be that person who can be the mechanism who, helps make your friends have a sustainable livelihood or be millionaires or something. So every seminar, every workshop, every panel, every class you take, every professor you have has jumped through hoops and hurdles and all kinds of things to just get to where they are. And if they can say, oh, Jordan, oh, Dolores, like, I remember you as a student. How can I help you be the person who people look to and go to when they need support one day? So, you're already paying money, or somebody's paying money for you to be here. Make every penny count. I'm in your class paying you thousands of dollars. You better hook me up with letter of rec. I'm coming to your office hours, even if I don't have anything to talk about related to this class. Tell me your journey. Let's build. Like, you need to make me something worth this investment. So make the network work, make the community work, take advantage of being here.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Naim is saying. Like, take full advantage. Like, a university academic space is such a unique and rich environment for making good connections that can help you later on. And it's very different once you leave that kind of bubble of academia. And then I want to share that. And then my career advice, I would say, is if you can't find the perfect opportunity or the perfect job, don't be afraid to pivot and go to something else, because maybe that perfect position hasn't been created yet, or maybe you need that other position to get towards that future better position that you wouldn't have even thought of in the first place. So.
Yes, ditto what Eli said. Sometimes your life changes with the most unexpected decision or situation, and changes for the good. So, definitely take advantage when opportunities come up like that, or be adaptable. My advice, I say this all the time, so if we ever are in the same space again and you hear me say this, please consider yourself forewarned. It is not the most eloquent advice, but it is the advice that I've held to for almost, it's like 17 years now, maybe a little bit more. But I remember when I was taking the SATs, I had to take them twice because the first time was not fabulous. Second time wasn't either, it was a little bit better. But I remember when I was getting out of the car, my dad stopped me and he said, Age, just have fun with it. Whatever happens, just have fun with it. And I have taken that with me everywhere I go, for every situation, for every job opportunity, every job talk, every meeting with a community partner. Have fun with it. And not in a way where it's like, you're not taking it seriously, but see the joy that can come out of the situations that you're in, whether that's a class, whether that's pushing your way through a master's thesis, whether it's being on the job market a little bit longer than you wanted. Enjoy it for what it's worth, because there really is a silver lining. And there's so much to learn. There's so much to gain. There's so many new people to meet. So enjoy the experiences. And when you get to a place where you're able to, create experiences that you can enjoy. And like Naim said, start creating spaces for people to enjoy their experience working with you. Because at the end of the day, stuff is going to be thrown at us. People are going to hate on us for what we look like. Imposter syndrome within our own minds is going to try to tear us down. We don't got time for that, right? What we do have time for is making the most of every situation. And if you go into it knowing that you're trying to have fun with it, I promise you, it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be better than all right. It's gonna be fabulous. And so that is my advice for whatever career path you end up taking.
All right. That's a wrap for our panel. Dolores, do you have any final words, Ms. President?
Yeah, you put me on the spot like that. I don't know. I can't see me. No, just thank you all so much for coming. For those that are in person, those that are virtual, for our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wise words and taking the time out of your busy days to come and talk with us. We really genuinely appreciate all your knowledge and expertise and just like the genuine advice you've been giving us. So again, just thank you all so much. And is it okay if anyone has any follow-up questions or wants to connect with you to like share your emails or anything like that, just to make sure before we do that. But if anyone has any questions, we can like forward them on to you.
Awesome. I'm gonna stop the recording now.
Okay.